So first of all, thank you guys for coming today. And BJ, thank you for putting this whole thing together and hearing that call to action, opening up, because without you and everybody else around the world that really took that call to action and turned the word into an actual action and turned the thought into an action, we wouldn't be here today. So I'm a piece of a puzzle, but it takes a lot more pieces like you to make that happen. So I just want to say thank you. Before we dive into everything that we're going to be speaking about today, it's going to be multifaceted, speaking about a lot of different topics. I want to explain how this technology works. Before that, I want to give a larger, bigger picture model to understand something over here. So this centers around the world, they're not like your ordinary operation of how things work, meaning you're not coming to a center to support yourself, to just support a center and move on. The exchange is bigger than between you and a center. The exchange is, yes, helping you in centers like this, helping the center continue expanding and moving on, remain operational and abundant. And then beyond that, Unifyd Healing came in. It was created to create something a whole lot bigger than that. So it's saying instead of being individual centers all around the world, let's all be a part of something bigger. Let's all create something bigger with this. And it all comes back to how this technology works, which I'll speak about in just a second, but there's something called the toroidal field. It's a torsion field, in other words. And that's your basic field of energy and how everything works. It's how creation works as we know it. It's the base of all creation. If you had to give a shape to the formless, it would be your torsion field, which is essentially like a donut of energy moving in all directions with no beginning and no end. The reason why I bring that up is because this model with Unifyd Healing, with centers like this one, and with all the centers all around the world, are basically operating according to that model, as opposed to the model that most people operate on today. So today, we're used to saying, I win, you lose. I gain, you don't. That's the balance that people speak about. But what if there was a way to balance where everybody wins? So in a world of duality, it's I win, you lose. Duality is not your fundamental reality. Your fundamental reality is oneness. So if we're operating in a world of oneness, then if everything is connected to the same thing, there is no I win and you lose in that world. There's if I win, you win, and if you win, that person wins, because it's a win for all. And that's something that I really am trying to move a lot of people into, of no longer thinking in terms of duality, fundamentally speaking, on like the base of it all. Duality is still something that we experience, and that's fine. I'm here and you're there, and we experience two separate bodies. That's okay to live a human experience that way, to live according to time, even though we know it's not a part of that fundamental reality, because it's a tool that we use. It's a tool that we use to live in what we call the matrix. The matrix is not a bad thing. The matrix is what we have and what we operate in. But if you operate limited to the matrix, then you're missing the whole point. If you operate in the matrix, understanding the laws that defy the matrix, that's called becoming a master of the matrix. That's where instantaneous healing happens. That's where successful businesses occur. That's where good relationships happen. All of those things are when you understand things like the law of conservation. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. The law of vibration. You experience what you're in resonance with. The law of oneness. Everything is one. If everything is one, I'm not going to do anything negative to something outside of me, because although in the matrix I experience it as an external thing, in reality, fundamentally speaking, it's not. So I want to preface with that and really explain that when you guys are coming to centers like this one in specific, this center is helping you when you come, and you're helping it when you come. But you're doing something bigger for the world as a whole, because this center also gives contributions to Unifyd Healing. And Unifyd Healing is a network to then use those funds in a very unique way. It's saying, no, we're not going to go and buy a $400 million yacht to make somebody rich, because that's how the corporate world works. We're going to use that money and give it right back into that field. And if you do that, giving is receiving. We'll continue growing naturally so long as you operate according to that torsion field. So what we've done over the past few months, some of you know, some of you may not, but we just got back from India. In February, Unifyd Healing and EE System came together. We flew out to India. We donated a 24-unit energy enhancement system to an ashram in India and made it free to everybody in the country. But that's not because of EE System, and it's not because of Unifyd Healing. It's because of them. It's because of the center owners. It's because of the people that make that possible, and bringing it back to that. And they're only able to make that possible because of you guys. So that's your full circuitry and full circle of what we're talking about, where you ultimately are supporting the world, which is supporting you right back in a much bigger picture than just the usual exchange of, I give you this and you give me this back. There's a lot of different factors here that create and encompass a whole lot more than two parties in this equation. It's all parties that are basically living on this planet and beyond. So, what is the EE system? How does it work? And how can we ground the science to like the layman, the common person around the world, to understand this on a very basic level? And it's not something that's that easy to do because you're dealing with very complex ideas, but we all know that every complex idea can be broken down essentially to its basic foundations. And if we can break it down to its basic foundations, then you can understand this, at least big picture and the principles of what this technology is and how it works through that way. So I'm going to do my best to bring it down to that level and explain. Let's start with this. Simple explanation, then we're going to expand upon that whole thing. Your body can experience disease, it can experience health. What's the difference if we had to simplify it on the level of physicality? And the difference is very simple. Health starts within your body, not outside of your body. Health starts specifically within the cells of your body and the charge of those cells. A healthy body is one whose cells have an optimal charge, which, by the way, are calculated or measured in what we call millivolts. So cellular millivoltage, that's the word that I'm going to keep using. Optimal health is when your cells are charged between 70 to 90 millivolts. Cancer exists anywhere from 20 millivolts and below. In other words, a lower electrical charge in your cells equates to disease, equates to imbalance, equates to ailments that you experience emotionally, physically, spiritually, whatever it may be. A higher charge in your cells, 70 millivolts and above, optimally between 70 and 90, will give you that higher charge, therefore equating to health, wellness, balance, homeostasis, harmony, and all that fun stuff that we all want. And we don't yet know how to get there because we like making things complex. If you have to do that, and you have to do that, and you have to do that to simplify it, you need to charge yourselves. That's it. It's all electricity. It's a game of electricity. If you have the proper charge, you create an environment where dis-ease cannot exist in the first place. So the paradigm shift here is, let's stop fighting disease and just start creating an environment that cannot host disease, but rather host health. It's the paradigm shift that we're seeing right now all around the world. Some people resist it, but we're going to have no choice but to accept it, because that's how we move forward and create a healthy world. So now let's go big picture. We understand the millivoltage, the cellular millivoltage of your cells and the charge and its importance. How does something like the Energy Enhancement System technology do that? We're going to zoom out and we're going to go back to the environment for just a moment. Principle 1. The environment that you're sitting in is the environment and the literal, like, what your body will take over, what your body will become. If you're sitting in an incoherent environment, an environment with toxins, an environment with disease, what's going to happen? You're going to take on those toxins, you're going to take on those diseases, you're going to take on those ailments. And I'm not just speaking about physical things, I'm speaking about incoherent energetic fields, like a lot of the technology that we use today. The technology that we use today is not built on coherent energetic fields as we know. And because they're not built on that, well, our body receives and now is coming into contact with that environment and takes that up. Let's ground that for a second and explain what that actually means. Example 1. If I were to hug you for long enough, our heartbeats would synchronize. If women spend enough time together in a room, at a place of work, whatever it may be, most of them will have their menstrual cycle synchronized. If the bioresonant field, the resonance that you're sitting in, the environment that you're sitting in, is toxic and incoherent, you will sink to that. And you will sink to disease, and therefore experience that. And I'm repeating on purpose so we really, really understand it. And if we have that healthy environment, you will sink to that healthy bioresonant field. Your body also radiates a bioresonant field. The two will sync, and you will experience health over disease. So when it comes to the energy enhancement system, specifically in the technology, You're speaking about something very unique here in terms of how it works, because it's not just paying attention to the physical. It's paying attention to the spiritual. It's bridging the gap between what we think are two separate things, and they're not. The physical is something that we experience our lives through, because we experience our lives through the limitations of the matrix, the confines of physicality. Anything below the speed of light is what we can necessarily perceive. But there are things going on faster than 186,000 miles per second. We know that. We know that there are gamma waves. We know that there are gamma rays. We know that there are microwaves that are slower. They're just out of our spectrum of what we can see. The question is, how do we unite this one spectrum, as opposed to living a life where there are two separate spectrums, and then we have to divide and create a gap between the two. So what that means is we have to pay attention to the base of all reality and the base form that comes out of the formless in everything. And that thing, in essence, is what we call a torsion field, a toroidal field. A toroidal field, as we said, is just a donut of energy going in all directions simultaneously. There's no beginning, there's no end. There are no limitations to that thing. We know the law of conservation tells us energy cannot be created or destroyed. Nikola Tesla figured that out and was killed for it. Because there are people that don't like us tapping into that. Because the moment we tap into that, you don't need to depend on certain organizations and corporations anymore. In this case, you're not going to need to depend on a pharmaceutical corporation or a medical system that says, you need us. Because the energy enhancement system doesn't say you need us. It says you need you, and we're going to help you return back to yourself. That's the point of understanding what's going on here. So this technology does not heal you. The human body heals itself. The human body always tries to heal itself. When you cut yourself, you don't have to think about it healing and scabbing and forming new skin. It does it whether you're asleep or awake. It does it whether you're thinking about it or not, because there's a divine intelligence and order in this world. We need to allow the body to do what it's meant to do, and the body will not be able to do that so long as you put it in a negative environment, so long as you put it in an environment that has obstacles and struggles and hardships where it can't do what it came here to do. You give the body the proper environment, it will heal itself a whole lot quicker. So when it comes to the energy enhancement system, your base is your toroidal field, your torsion field. How do you access that energy? And why is it important to access that? Because a torsion field, as we said, is the base of all life and creation as we know. And the more you come into contact with a coherent toroidal field, the more your body will take on and remember that coherent toroidal field. That's the difference between dis-ease, disease, and health and wellness. How do you access or tap into that infinite energy, what we call scalar energy, something that's faster than the speed of light? And the super simple science behind that, without going into the complexities of it, is very simple. You take two circles, which each stand for an electromagnetic field. Two circles that are identical electromagnetic fields. When you have two identical electromagnetic fields and you merge them, the merging point with the alignment of those two identical electromagnetic fields will yield you access almost like a portal to what you call the scalar field. Things that occur faster than the speed of light, in scalar terms, 1.4 times the speed of light, but that doesn't matter. We're going to keep this simple. Two electromagnetic fields coming together in exact form, in exact proximity, perfectly aligned, create what you call a two-point torsion field. With the energy enhancement system, they took it a step further. They said 2 points is only so stable, let's create 4. Wow. So what you're seeing in the room that you're in right now is a 4-point stable torsion field, which I'll explain in just a second. If you look at the technology, you're seeing two components to it. You're seeing a black box behind it, the computer, and you're seeing a screen transmitting what looks like colors moving at different speeds, in different directions, over and over and over again. Let's start with the box behind it for a second. That box is what Dr. Michael will call an engine field generator. She's using a computer to create an electromagnetic field, because that's exactly what it does. The question is it a coherent field? And if you take 4 of those, or in this case, 8 of those, and put them all in exact proximity and alignment with each other, what do you see? What do you get? You get the merge of 4 different points with exact identical electromagnetic fields all merging together to one center point. That's your tape on the floor. And that one center point is the center of that torsion field, is where that torsion field is being generated, in this case, a 4-point stable torsion field, which goes out, by the way, 2.2 miles. So your scalar field, in this case with the energy enhancement system, goes out 2.2 miles. It radiates 2.2 miles. But when it comes to scalar specifically, that's only things on the other side of the spectrum, beyond the speed of light. In the spiritual community, we would call that 5D, 5th dimensional reality. How do you merge what we experience as life in the matrix, which is 3rd dimensional reality, with 5th dimensional reality? You bring in a whole different component to transmit certain codes to the body. And that's what your screen is doing. So your screen is taking light. Light is the essence of absolutely everything. In this case, light that you can see, the spectrum that you can perceive, is from 360 to 720 nanometers. If you look at it on a range from red to orange to yellow to green to blue to indigo to violet. That's your rainbow. There are colors before that and there are colors after it. But we can only perceive that within the matrix so long as we're existing this way. So that doesn't mean that we say we leave that matrix. That say we must ask ourselves, how do we use the matrix in a more coherent and productive way? And if we can use light, which is important because your DNA and the prime function of your DNA is literally the storage of photons. Photons is another word for light. So if your DNA and its purpose is to store light, then if you can give it coherent light with certain codes, then you're now also using fields within your 3rd dimensional reality to create what we experience as health in the body. So you're seeing multiple different things here happening on the screen. You're seeing movement. That movement is something called your Fibonacci sequence. There's some moving at different speeds. There's some changing speeds. If you stare at it long enough, you'll see that after a few seconds it will change direction and even change speed. The change of direction and change of speed is in alignment with what we call the Fibonacci sequence. That's pretty much an organization and a ratio of numbers as they grow that's been shown pretty much embodying creation as we know it. Everything from how a flower blooms to how a baby literally is formed from the first cell and its multiplication happens in a certain set of numbers. Those numbers are the same in nature across the board. That's your Fibonacci sequence. Then you have a certain hertz called the Schumann's resonance. The Schumann resonance, its base is 7.83 hertz. That's also being transmitted through what you're seeing on the screen itself, so we can experience it within the 3D, within our physical experience. But my favorite part is the colors, because colors are more than just what we think they are. A lot of people say, well, what is color? And nobody actually knows on a deep level what color is, because they just look at it and they say, wow, that's red and that's purple. But the difference between red and purple is a change of frequency. It's a change of wavelength. It's a change of energy. That's it. So when you have red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, and you're going on a spectrum of nanometers, because 360 is closer to red, and 720 is closer to violet, and everything in between will go in between the 360 to your 720. The only thing you're changing is the nanometers of light, is the wavelength, is the energy, is the vibration, is the resonance. You change the resonance, you see something else. That's why, by the way, when you go to 5th generational technology, otherwise known as 5G, they needed that technology to be on almost every single light post. Why? They didn't need that with 4G. But with 5G, it's shorter wavelengths. So the energy is more powerful, but it travels shorter distances. So if it travels shorter distances, but it's more powerful, your internet's going to be faster, but you need them in a lot closer proximity in order to complete that grid. That's what color really is. It's a change of resonance, frequency, and vibration. But what color is more than that is when we look at the rainbow, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, we've been taught those in school. They call them Roy G. Biv, but it's not a coincidence that in Eastern medicine you have somebody generally sitting in their lotus pose or lotus flower, and you see those 7 energy points. And they happen to be in the same exact order of red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. And it wasn't because some ancient, Asian philosopher decided to draw a rainbow. It's because they understood something deeper. And they understood that color is frequency. They understood that each organ works on an optimal frequency. And they were smart enough to identify that organ X, like the heart, works on the frequency that is expressed in third-dimensional reality as green. They were smart enough to understand that organ Y, aka your stomach, your digestive system, your intestines, work on the energy that's expressed in our physical reality as yellow. And if you want to take that a step further, that connects to food. If you look at the color of real food, food that actually comes out of this earth, and not food that's created in the lab with pieces of things that come from this earth. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about food made from nature in its whole form. It's very colorful. Fruits are very colorful. Vegetables are very colorful. And it just so happens to be that the color of your food shows you which food is good for which part of the body. So pineapples, bananas, lemons, mangoes, they're generally good on the physical level for digestive systems in general. If you're having constipation, that's what will help you with. You can look that up. And if you think that's a coincidence, go and look at what green foods are good for. They help with your heart and they clear your lungs. That's what your heart chakra is connected to. Your heart and your lungs. Go look at what red foods are good for. Inflammation, cherries. They're very good for getting rid of inflammation. Because they help get rid of inflammation in your system, which is connected to your blood, which is connected to your muscles, which is connected to your physical vessel, which is connected to the things that ground you to this planet. And by the way, if you stand on this planet and ground in dirt, which is brown but closer to red. By the way, in Hebrew, the word for ground or dirt is Adamah. Adamah comes from the word Adam, Adam and Eve. And Adom means red. All of those things are codes in language. That was something that was understood back in the day that we've forgotten. Red is something that connects you to this planet. It's the most physical, dense form of all energy in the plane that we experience. So when you want to train a guard dog to be very aggressive, you give him red, bloody meat. And if you want that same dog to calm down, you give him fruits. Generally, things that are more green, blue, purple, indigo, violet, things like that will calm that same dog down. Same thing with people. People will be more aggressive when they eat a lot of those foods that are denser in their energy, that are denser in their vibration. And this is a generalization, but it works across the board, almost like zodiac signs. If you look at a big picture, is every Cancer exactly what every other Cancer is? Is every Pisces exactly what every other Pisces is? No, but there's a generalization that you can go according to. So see, this is the same thing in terms of what I'm explaining. So why are we talking about color? The reason why we're talking about color is very simple, because that color, just like the food, helps heal certain parts of your body. That transmits specific forms of light, specific parts of the spectrum of light that we operate in, to your DNA, because your DNA and its prime function is the storage of light. And your body is intelligent enough to then say, okay, let's throw it to the right part of the body where it will rebalance that part of the body once again. So that's why you're essentially seeing a rainbow if you look deep enough. You'll see green, you'll see purple, you'll see blue. You'll see different colors in this that will transmit different things through light codes. So let's zoom out again. You got your electromagnetic field and multiple of them that are identical merging from 4 different points of this specific room to create a torsion field. That's taking care of balance in 5th dimensional reality. That's your scalar energy, your scalar technology, your torsion field. We then bridge the gap between 5D and 3D by transmitting what's necessary within this realm below the speed of light. Those are your colors. That's your Fibonacci sequence. That's your 7.83 hertz, which is the Schumann resonance. And when you mix the two, you now have a holistic version of health and a holistic version of balance that doesn't just say it's a spiritual thing and doesn't just say it's a physical thing, but understands that there is no difference between the two because every physical thing has a spiritual root. And if we try to create a separation between the two, you're going to experience what the medical industry has caused for a very long time. And that comes out of a consciousness of what we call reductionism. You know, reductionism and holism. Reductionism is, I have all the knowledge on every single part of the body and how it works, but I don't have the awareness of how all those parts interact with each other. So they create Accutane for your acne, but it gives you liver damage. They create a pill for your heart, but it gives you kidney failure. There are side effects because it's a reductionistic point of view as opposed to a holistic point of view, a whole picture, a big picture. So in essence, what you're seeing here with the energy enhancement system technology is a holistic picture, is a holistic project that was put together to bridge the so-called gap between 3D and 5D, to bring the two together because that's what we are. We're not just physical beings. We're beings that exist in those dimensions as well. If we can give the body the environment that it needs, not just on the physical level, but on the spiritual level as well, you will experience health and wellness over disease and ailments every single day. And it's not the technology doing it, it's you doing it. Your body always tries to do that. The question is, are you giving your body the proper environment to do what it does best? So in short, that's how this technology works. That's what you're sitting in. And the difference between the two fields is the scalar field does go out 2.2 miles. But to get the full effect of bridging the gap between both dimensions, the physical and spiritual, you actually have to be in this room. Not even in that room, in this room. Because it's the light that can't travel through. This form of light at this spectrum from 360 to 720 cannot travel through walls. Scalar can travel through walls. That's why it goes out in all directions 2.2 miles. This is specifically in the room. When you merge the two together, you experience why everybody's having such incredible testimonials. Because the body is perfect. We just need to return to the perfection of the body. And if we can remember that, then we can experience health over disease all the time. So that's your big picture gist of how this thing works. So at this point, before we move on, if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, if there are any.
So how is the 2.2 miles measured? My other question was, is for these colors to work, does the eye need to be able to receive it? Or is it kind of put out from the screen, and how is that screen different than a computer screen?
So question number one, I think that they measure it, and don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure they use something called an oscilloscope or something like that. And it's used to measure things in those like, it's used to measure scalar waves, basically. But it's not perfect because they haven't perfected it. You're dealing with like quantum things now. When you're dealing with that world, we're as advanced as we may be, we're not advanced enough to do that perfectly. So I'm pretty sure that's how they got down to it. But I should ask Dr. Michael that to have a better explanation. That's a very good question. And say it again?
Next Instagram post.
Next and the answer to your second question, I'm going to answer that by asking you a question. To receive vitamin D from the sun, do you have to stare at it?
Right, so that kind of led into my next question, whether it was just something that was coming out from the screen and how that screen would be different than a computer screen. Like, are these different?
Oh, no. They're using computer screens.
Okay.
These are monitors from a company that we all know, Bank or whatever they're called, BDNQ.
Yeah.
What she did was just take the proprietary technology, if you want to call it that, is not the screen. It's the code. It's the code, and then it's taking those engine field generators using computers in a unique way to create and access that flow in the scalar field, which is beyond the speed of light. You do that by merging identical, in certain proximity, identical electromagnetic fields, in this case 4 different points. So this is using something like this specific screen you can buy. You can buy from someone. It's the light that we're talking about. The light is just using light in a specific way through a specific code that she created, that's like you know how Coca-Cola has their formula? That's her formula. Her formula is the code that's being transmitted, not the physical screen itself. So that screen, just like if you were to use red light on a screen, you can use blue light on a screen, on a computer screen, right? At night, if you're looking at the computer screen, it does something to your eyes. In that case, in a negative way, because it stops the melatonin from doing its thing, from producing, and then it messes up your sleep. That's also a computer screen, only in that case it does something negative. So she found, what she did was use the same technology in a positive way. She's just transmuted it. That's the idea, yeah. And we'll go right to you after.
Is the intention just to use this if you have like a measurable ailment, or if you're reasonably healthy and you come in, can you receive benefit also?
Well, I'm alive somehow. And I was good before. I really think the reason why Ryan and I aren't drained right now is because we've been in these every single day. Like really, because we've been nonstop from morning to night, nonstop. Maybe an hour in between to lay down, but it's been nonstop. So let's put it this way: the sicker you are, the lower the charge in your cell will be. And the lower the charge in your cell is, the more apparent the shift in charge will be. All right, so if you're at 20 and you're going to 70, the change of 50 is going to be a lot more apparent than the change from 65 to 70, let's say, right? Or 70 to maintain. Very big difference in experience. Really, it's for everybody. Like, I want to see these in airports. We're working on getting them into airports. I want to see them in schools. I want to see them everywhere. But generally, the people that are going to see the most impact from it are the people with the lowest charge, because this is technically a human battery charge. That's what you're talking about. So I would say if you're, and by the way, let's get something else out of the way. This is not the only thing that you can do, right? This is a piece of a very, very big puzzle. I like using this because it, basically when you leave this room, when you leave this center, we just need to acknowledge that we're in a pretty sick world. And there's not so much that can be done about it, because I'm not just talking about people. I'm talking about like all those, emitters and radiators that are out there, all those 5G transmitters, all the garbage in your food and garbage in your water, even when you clean it. It's like, it's tough. So until we get to fix that, and that's only going to be changed when we have some form of, which is already starting, a spiritual evolution and a spiritual revolution. When we have a spiritual revolution, we'll start using our technology in a more conscious way. People that create things like this, like Dr. Michael, for example, she's a lot more spiritually oriented, but she has the technological intelligence behind it also. So when you have that, it's a beautiful formula, because you can use the physical world and not let it use you, and guide the use of that in a spiritual way. In short, when you leave this place, just because of the way that the world is, it's kind of problematic. So that's why disease is rising. That's why cancer is rising. That's why autism used to be 1 in 10,000, is now 1 in 35, I think, or something like that. And it's only getting worse. So we need to rebalance that environment. I like preventing as opposed to dealing with something when it comes. So I would use things like this. I would use things like meditation. Meditation is a technology. That's exactly what it is. You can show through meditation a change in the charge of your cells if you're good enough. You can drop, this will help you drop deeper into meditative state. So look at this not as an ultimate reality, right? Look at this as a stepping stone to get to where you want to get. Ultimately, if you really want to talk about the business model of EE System and these centers, if we get to the world that I envision, these centers should never exist anymore, because you don't need them. There's a lot of work to get there. But the point is to get to a point where this company goes bankrupt, because nobody needs it anymore. And every center has no use to it anymore, because you have that technology within yourself. When that's going to happen, I don't know. We got billions of people to deal with, and it's a process. But that's the difference between the world now and the world that we want to get to. It's empowerment versus disempowerment. It's saying, depend on us for the rest of your life, in parentheses, because it's a very good business model, or let us help you get to where you already have within you. And that way you never need me again. It's like give the man a fish or teach him how to fish. They like giving the fish because you have to keep buying it. If you teach the man how to fish, he never has to buy a fish again. He knows how to get it himself. So we're in the process right now of we need to teach the world how to fish. We need to teach the world how to gather for themselves. And by the way, it's not just in this realm. It's not just with this technology, and it's not just in the health field. It's in everything. People have forgotten the basic laws, the foundational laws of this universe. People have forgotten that energy cannot be created or destroyed. So they really believe that death is bad. People have forgotten that all is one. So they don't care sending a nuclear bomb to another country. People have forgotten the law of vibration, that you experience what you're in resonance with. So they don't understand how to speak consciously or think consciously. People have forgotten the law of cause and effect. So they call things miracles. They call things luck. There's no such thing as miracles and luck. There's either a cause or an effect. And everything that you're experiencing is the effect of a cause. The fact that you don't know that cause is a whole different story. But just because you don't know that cause, to call it lucky is dumb. Because luck is assuming that there was no cause to that perceived effect. But when you can understand things like the law of cause and effect, what you understand and what you do next is very simple. The question that you'd be asking yourself is, how do I produce a cause in such a way that will produce a desired effect? That's called conscious manifestation. We're all manifesting all the time. The question is, are you doing it in a conscious way or not? When we remember that all is one, literally and scientifically, because nothing can be isolated from anything else, and you'll never go to war again. Corruption will cease. War will cease. Greed will dissolve. All these things will move away forever. When you understand the law of vibration, you'll never do anything or speak about topics that you don't want. You're going to focus on what you do. And beyond just that, you're never going to curse anybody either, because you're going to understand that through the law of vibration, you're cursing yourself, literally. Those words are distorting the water in your body, and a distortion of water in your body is the beginning of all disease that starts emotionally and ends physically. If you understand the law of conservation, reincarnation is not something that we have to believe in. It's obvious. Because of course energy keeps moving. Things like the Big Bang, they'll dissolve in the way that we think that they happen. Because whether or not two atoms came together and created this order as we know it is not what I'm talking about. If you ask those people where it started, there is no answer. And even if there is an answer, the next question is, well, where did that start? And you get very, very close to understanding this conclusion, but not quite. We still got to get there. There is no beginning and there is no end. So what we're pretty much doing through this process of remembrance is moving from our experience of free will, which is your experience of the ego, into your experience of divine will, your experience of the soul. But I want to speak on that for a second. When I say the ego, there are a lot of people in the world, especially in the spiritual community, that think the ego is a bad thing. There's nothing that you have that you can't use in a productive way. The ego is the motor that drives you through this physical world. The ego is the reason why we opened 264 centers in 11 months. The ego is the reason why people become successful. The question is the desire of that ego aligned with the desire of your soul? The ego becomes counterproductive when the desire of your ego is misaligned and not aligned with the desire of your soul. So when you're doing these things, look at it as two engines. You have an engine in this physical reality, and you have an engine in that spiritual reality. And the spiritual engine trumps all. So you have your free will, and you have your divine will. Your free will is you saying, I want to do this and this and that, and I don't like this experience because it's uncomfortable. Your divine will gives you exactly what you need to fulfill your purpose. So the best way that I can explain that in terms of like a visualization, you know those cars with two steering wheels? And you're learning to drive? We're learning to live right now. That's why we come here, to learn lessons. We're in a school. Just like driving school, it's the same exact thing. So there's you sitting in your free will driver's seat, and there's you sitting in your divine will driver's seat. And you in your free will driver's seat has amnesia, forgot about that person sitting over there, forgot about the purpose. So it comes in to find that purpose. So it's sitting there, and the divine will driver, you in that reality, knows exactly where you need to go. And so long as the free will driver is moving in that direction, everything's fine. You're good. But the second you choose out of free will, which is your ego, that's the engine of free will, the second you choose to deviate from the path that you came here to experience, what would you do if you were divine will without a driver's seat? You're going to jerk it back onto the road. And if you go far enough, well, then that jerk is going to have to be a whole lot bigger. And the bigger that jerk is, the harder your head hits the window. And it hurts. The hit of your head on the window is our experiences of disease, is our experiences of hardship in the world, is our experiences of obstacles that come our way. But when you understand that it was divine will bring you right back on path, then the things that you once thought you were a victim to in that driver's seat with amnesia of divine will right next to you, suddenly you'll say thank you to. Because it's the experiences of cancer and heart disease, and I'll go as far as even sexual abuse, and all these crazy, severe, traumatic experiences that happen to us, they don't happen to us, they happen for us. So from the level of free will, we sit there and say, how could this happen to me? I'm a victim. How could this happen to my son or my daughter? Poor guy, horrible God. There is no separation. That's acting out of amnesia. It's acting out of forgetting the divine will. There is nothing that happens to you. There is everything that happens for you. Remember, if we understand, and if we remember the law of oneness, which basically states that all is one and everything is interconnected, that means that each and every one of us are connected to Source. Would you ever take a hammer and break your own leg? No. Then why would Source ever take a hammer to hurt itself? There is no experience in this world that happens to hurt you. You can choose to take it in that way, but there's no experience in this world that happens to hurt you. Every experience that comes your way is a gift from yourself to bring you back on path. And it's very hard for us, and I bring up the severe and traumatic experiences on purpose because it triggers people. And when people get triggered, they listen. And when people listen, their systems are opened. And that's when you plant the seed. So let's hear the lesson. Let's hear the message. There are a lot of 70 and 80-year-olds today that are still dealing with the same tests from when they were 20. And there are some 20-year-olds today that are passing tests that a 50-year-old is still repeating from their 20s. It's not about age, it's not about experience. Experience is a very big part of it, but that's not the end-all be-all. It's what are you choosing to do, and how are you choosing to perceive the experiences that are coming your way. If you play victim to them, you're going to say, why me? Why is this happening to me? And the cycle will continue repeating. Most people have the cycle repeat for the rest of their life. And they come back and hopefully learn from that and don't repeat that. But we don't need to live 100 lifetimes in order to get through a certain cycle. We don't need to experience disease and hardships and traumatic experiences to remind us of why we came here if we remember what's being spoken about here today. If we remember what's being spoken about here today, and I use the word remember and not learn because you guys aren't learning anything here. This is something that's already within you. I'm just taking it out. And the deeper it is, the harder it is. And some people get triggered and some people understand it. But the work still needs to be done. So the point over here is reshaping our perspectives of the hardships in our lives. There is nothing that came here to hurt you. I've had my own hardships with physical ailments. It took me a long time to figure that one out, of it's coming to give me a message. And it almost killed me. Because guess what happens if you veer too far off the road with your free will? You're going to hit a tree. You're going to move on. And you'll try again. We don't need to do that. But if it comes your way, that means you needed to experience it. The point over here is whoever's listening right now and where you're at in your life, we all have hardships. It might be a hardship with your father, with your mother, with your spouse, with your ex, with your son, with your daughter. We all have one of those things. Every single one of us. And some of us are so triggered by relationships, and we look at those people and say, screw you, I don't like you. Well, according to what's being said here, they're your greatest teachers. They're the people that came to play the role, to open those triggers, to open your system, to teach you what you needed to learn to keep moving to the next step. So those people are the people that you have to say thank you to. And here's another extreme example that I'm going to finish this entire part of the lecture on. The Great Awakening. How many of you love it? Raise your hand. It's a great thing. It's a great thing that's going on. You know who's responsible for it?
We are. We are.
No. Bill Gates, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, Hitler, all of those people are the reason why we looked in the mirror and said there's a change that needs to be made. So up until now, we forget. Up until now, we're sitting there and we're saying these are bad people, we got to get rid of them. No. They'll get rid of themselves and they will dissolve in our expression and experience of reality the second we change not the mirror, but the thing that's looking into the mirror, which is you. They're a reflection of us. And if Source will never do anything to hurt itself, then Source created that experience to wake itself up. Because up until 3 years ago, the majority of the world was in a coma of awareness. And suddenly, the world is starting to wake up. And yeah, you could say it's because of us, big picture, because it is. Because they're also a part of us. But surface-wise, linearly speaking, they're the people we have to thank for the Great Awakening that's happening in the world. Because it was through the tragedy that they brought, through the chaos that they brought into the world, that caused people to wake up and say, wait a second, what's going on? They, and listen to this because it's a big statement, were divine will bringing us back onto path. That's huge. To say that somebody like that is divine will bringing you back onto path is something that I don't think most of the world is ready to accept.
How far away off the path we got. How big all that means to be.
Let's reverse it again. The harder the head hits the window, right, will be the further you veer off the path. So you can say that they were an expression of how far we veered off the path. And they were also an expression of the strength that needed to come from divine will to bring us back on. Because both of those are the same exact thing. Also no difference. So whatever it is, whoever is experiencing whatever you're experiencing today, whether it's an ailment, a disease, a hardship, an emotional instability, a hard relationship, something with your job, whatever. When it happens to you next time, if you want to keep moving through this mission, through this life, through this path, and embody that purpose faster than having to repeat tests over and over and over and over again for decades at a time, all you have to do is shift one question. When something happens to you, number one, understand that it happened for you. And instead of asking the question of why did this happen to me, ask yourself the question of what is the lesson, why did I choose this, and what do I have to learn from it? And if you can find that lesson, you can pass the test. If you can pass the test, you've received the gift. And if you receive the gift, you have no need to be given that gift again. You don't give you don't give one person the same gift twice. It keeps going. So that's the reshaping perspective that I wanted to bring up today because of a theme that I've been seeing across the board of victimhood. It's an illusion. We're the people in control and in power of our lives, simply through the way that we choose to perceive things, not by the things that happen to us, but by the way that we choose to perceive things that happen to us into they happen for us to help us grow. So I'll end that one there. Any questions? Yes.
So this was before your
Sure.
philosophical. Two questions. One, when I walked in here Thursday, I was below a 20 millivolts level. I've been here 3 days this week. How do we measure that millivolt?
There's a specific, I'm gonna get you the name. You can measure it, I don't remember, but I'll give you other ways to measure it.
So some centers have this way of measuring.
I don't know actually,
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure,
Okay.
but there is a specific like gadget that you can
Right.
purchase for something.
Because- yeah.
The reflection of your cellular millivoltage is in two other ways that you can see it. The pH level of your body, so a more acidic body will be a lower charge, a more alkaline body will be a higher charge,
Right.
because cancer can't exist in the same environment, that's not how it works.
Right.
And the other way, the other reflection that you can use is your oxygen ratio in your blood, the level of oxygen, like how oxygenated are you? The higher your oxygen levels, the higher your charge is. Which is why I'm saying, when you're in a system like this, do things like breath work. Try not to be loud. But do things like that. Even outside of the system, you want to bring this energy with you. You want to keep it with you for as long as possible. Do breath work at home. You know, do meditations at home to increase that charge intentionally. Because you're literally the one doing it. So oxygen and pH, the potential of hydrogen potential, are two ways of being able to reflect cellular millivoltage in a different way, in different units, but showing you the same thing. I'll find the gadget that I'm talking about. I'm forgetting his name. Come here and set, and I wouldn't recommend 1 hour. If you're going to do it, give it a minimum of 2 hours at a time. Allow your body to get into the state that it needs to get into. We like instant gratification sometimes, but it will be worthwhile if you really allow your body to just drop it and do its thing. Sometimes it takes some time, you know, but 2 hours at the minimum is what I would suggest. And the more you can do in a sitting, the better. If you're sitting here for 8 hours, I don't expect you to be like a Buddha with your eyes closed forever. I can't do that. I would freak out. But big picture, the more you can drop in a single sitting, the better. Yeah, eyes closed will bring energy into your body as opposed to exerting it out to sense what's going on around you. One of my favorite quotes says, 10% of life is what happens to you. 90% of life is how you choose to respond to it. So as our responses change, which is basically a consequence of our collective awareness at the time, if we change our awareness and our consciousness of the world and how things work, we'll change the way we deal with situations, we respond to situations. And when we change the way that we respond to situations, and what happens after that situation occurs changes. So conflict may have been the thing that you perceived as happening to you. But the response to that conflict, as I said earlier, can either result in war between two countries or unity between two countries. Because we could sit here and say, you know, you triggered me, I triggered you. You have your truth, I have my truth. I may not agree with you, but you're obviously responding in this way because you have something that I can't see. So that trigger causes me to be able to see something that I couldn't see before. And in that way, what could have ended in war now causes you to be a closer friend of mine because you just turned into a teacher instead of an enemy. That's what a shift in consciousness brings to a shift in response, which brings a shift in reality. So we'll still have the obstacles and the challenges and the hardships and things like that. But the way that we deal with them and treat them will change. And that's, in my opinion, what's going to change the world. I hope that answers that question. Yeah. Okay, well, we're doing good here. We're doing good here. What time is it?
6:32.
Okay. So, if there are no more questions, we can bring it to a close. We could do personal things if you guys want. We do love testimonials. If you guys are willing to share your story, we use those. We're creating a documentary right now called Empowered. And it's all about bringing power back to the people. So if you guys have any story, a story of your own, a story of something that happened to a family member with this technology specifically, please come and share it with me.
We will.
And that will be awesome because it will help other people. By sharing that story, we can really, shift everything around us. So again, I want to say thank you to you for making this all possible. And thank you for opening up. Let's support centers like this, support yourself, support the center, support the mission as a whole, and let's continue doing what we came here to do.